Welcome, dear listeners. Today I bring you a story that transcends time, a narrative that echoes from 1877 to our modern hearts, a love story that broke the most rigid barriers of Brazilian imperial society, where a generous soul transformed not just one life, but an entire plantation in the Paraíba Valley. Imagine for a moment a March morning when years of routine break apart, an unexplained absence. A master who goes in search of his employee and discovers a secret that will forever change their lives. 5 abandoned children, a woman with an infinite heart, and a love that defied all the social conventions of an era. This is the true story of how kindness can flourish even in the most arid soil of inequality. Where are you watching from? Leave your city in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This helps us a lot to continue bringing these exciting stories to you. Year 1877. São Benedito Plantation, Vassouras, Rio de Janeiro. At the height of the coffee empire, when Brazilian society lived under rigid social hierarchies, the bell of São Benedito Plantation echoed through the March morning with its customary punctuality, cutting through the mist that still hovered over the coffee groves of the Paraíba Valley. The air carried the humid perfume of earth freshly watered by the night's rain, mixed with the sweet aroma of ripe coffee that hung from the branches like small red promises. Colonel Francisco Pereira da Silva adjusted his linen vest as he descended the stairs of the main house, his steps echoing on the polished jacaranda flooring. At 39 years old, he maintained the erect posture that military life had given him, though his brown eyes held a silent melancholy since he had been widowed 4 years earlier. The plantation's morning routine followed its natural course. The distant lowing of cattle, the singing of slaves in the coffee fields, the creaking of cartwheels. But something was different that Monday. A palpable absence, like a missing note in a familiar symphony. Rosa Maria dos Santos had not appeared. For 2.5 years since she had taken over the care of Pedro, 8 years old, and Isabel, 5, his motherless children, Rosa had never missed a single day. She always arrived before the first cock's crow, with her clean chintz dress and her dark brown hair tied in a simple bun that revealed her delicate nape, where small rebellious strands danced with the morning breeze. Francisco stopped on the veranda, observing the dirt path that wound between the century-old mango trees. The silence of the house weighed on his shoulders like a cloak of unease. Pedro and Isabel were still sleeping, unaware that their protected routine was about to change. Master Francisco, the hoarse voice of Joaquim Benedito, the free mulatto foreman, interrupted his thoughts. Rosa didn't come today, Joaquim. In 2.5 years, it's the first time. The foreman scratched his graying head, frowning his forehead marked by decades of scorching sun. That's not like Rosa, sir. That woman is more reliable than a Swiss clock. A tightness in his chest took hold of Francisco. Rosa was not just his children's nanny. She was the serene presence that had brought back some peace to that grieving house. Her sweet voice teaching the first letters to Pedro, her careful hands braiding Isabel's hair, her respectful but never submissive way of speaking to him, all of this had become as essential as the air he breathed. I'm going to her house, Francisco decided, taking the leather hat hanging on the veranda's coat rack. Do you think it's wise, sir? Joaquim hesitated. What will they say if the colonel goes after a dedicated employee? Francisco interrupted him firmly. Rosa cared for my children as if they were her own. If something happened to her, I need to know. The path to Rosa's house took about 20 minutes on horseback. Francisco rode slowly, observing the familiar landscape with worried eyes. The coffee plantations extended across the gentle slopes, interspersed by rows of eucalyptus that looked like soldiers in formation. The Pedras Creek murmured a monotonous song among the mossy stones. Rosa's house was in a small clearing before the wooden bridge, a simple adobe construction with a tile roof that looked more like patches than covering. But there was something special about that place. Care. Every detail revealed loving hands. The wildflowers planted in old cans, the yard swept with care, the washed clothes fluttering on the line like flags of hope. Francisco dismounted and walked to the door. He could hear low voices inside, muffled children's laughter. He knocked gently on the faded wooden door. Rosa? It's me, Francisco. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Then cautious steps approached the door, and when Rosa finally opened the door, Francisco realized that his life was about to take a completely new direction. Rosa stopped at the threshold, her cheeks colored with embarrassment. The chintz apron was spattered with flour, and loose strands of hair framed her oval face in an almost angelic way. In her light brown eyes, Francisco saw a mixture of surprise, embarrassment, and something deeper, fear. "Colonel, Her voice failed, and she lowered her gaze to her own hands, which trembled slightly. "Rosa, I was worried. You've never been absent before. Forgive me, sir, it's just that—" She hesitated, looking over her shoulder into the house. "Something happened. I couldn't leave." It was then that Francisco heard clearly, a small child calling Mama Rosa from inside, then another voice, higher pitched, and another. Rosa's heart beat so loudly it seemed to echo in the tense silence between them. Francisco noticed the conflict in her eyes, the duty to protect something precious fighting against the need to be honest with her employer. "May I come in?" he asked gently. Rosa hesitated for an eternal moment. Then, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, she stepped away from the door. The interior of the house was even simpler than Francisco had imagined. Whitewashed adobe walls, clean and waxed-packed earth floor, some rough but well-cared-for furniture. But that's not what impressed him. It was the 5 children, sitting around a low table, each with a plate of corn porridge in front of them. 5 pairs of wide eyes stared at the elegant man who had just entered their world. The youngest, who couldn't be more than 2 years old, clung to Rosa's skirt with her chubby little fingers. "Maria Joaquina," Rosa murmured, caressing the girl's golden curls. "I found her at the church door 6 months ago. There was no one. She was hungry, cold." Francisco remained motionless, absorbing the scene. A boy of about 12 years, with darker skin and intelligent eyes, stood up respectfully. "Good morning, Sir Colonel," said Jose, in a voice that tried to sound too adult for his age. "Jose lost his parents in last year's yellow fever epidemic," Rosa explained, her voice choked with emotion. "Caterina," she pointed to a 7-year-old girl with dark braids and shy eyes, "is the daughter of freed slaves who died on the way to São Paulo." One by one, Rosa introduced her children. Benedito, 5 years old, found wandering the streets of Vassouras. Anna, 9 years old, who had lost her parents in a cart accident. Each story was a dagger to Francisco's heart, but also a revelation about the woman he had known for 2.5 years. "I use my entire salary to take care of them," Rosa confessed, finally facing Francisco. 500 reis isn't much, but we manage. They help me with chores. They're good children. I know I should have told you before, sir, but I was afraid that I would forbid it," Francisco completed, his voice soft. Rosa nodded, her eyes watery. "They have no one else, Colonel. If I don't take care of them, they'll end up on the streets again or worse." Francisco observed the 5 children, who looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. He noticed how they positioned themselves instinctively around Rosa, like ducklings protecting their mother. He saw the genuine affection in her eyes when looking at each one, the same affection she dedicated to Pedro and Isabel. The silence stretched for long minutes, broken only by the tick-tock of an old clock on the wall and the distant murmur of the creek. Francisco felt all the social conventions of his era screaming against what he was seeing. A plantation colonel shouldn't get involved with a nanny's problems. A single woman caring for abandoned children was viewed with suspicion by conservative society. But when he looked into Rosa's eyes, those eyes that overflowed with unconditional love for 5 little helpless ones, Francisco felt something move deeply in his chest, something that had remained dormant for 4 years. "Do you know how to read, Rosa?" he asked suddenly. The question surprised her. "Yes, Colonel. My father was a merchant in Vassouras. He managed to teach me before he died." "And are you teaching them?" Rosa nodded timidly. "In my spare time. Jose can already read some words, and Anna is learning quickly." Francisco approached the table where there were still some slate fragments and charcoal, improvised school materials. He saw clumsy letters scribbled, simple words written with the care of someone who considers education a treasure. In that moment, an absolute certainty took hold of his heart. Rosa was not just an exceptional nanny. She was an extraordinary woman, endowed with a kindness that transformed misery into love, abandonment into family, despair into hope. "Rosa," he said, turning to her, "I want you to return to work tomorrow, and I want you to bring them with you." Rosa's eyes widened with surprise. "What do you mean, Colonel?" "I'm going to have this house renovated. You deserve better conditions. And your salary will be 800 reais monthly." The children exchanged astonished looks. Rosa brought her hand to her chest, as if trying to contain the heart that threatened to explode with emotion. "But, Colonel, what will the neighbors say? A man of your position, "They'll say I have the most dedicated nanny in the entire Paraíba Valley," Francisco replied with a smile that hadn't appeared on his lips in years, "and they won't be lying." When he left the adobe house that morning, Francisco carried with him more than a solution to the problem of Rosa having missed work. He carried the seed of something much greater, something that would grow until it transformed not only his life, but the entire meaning of family on his plantation. But Rosa still didn't know that the man who had just left through her door carried one last question on his lips, a question that would change everything. Why had his own children never made him feel the pride he felt seeing Rosa caring for those 5 abandoned children? The hammer echoed through the morning like music in the small house by Pedras Creek. For 2 weeks, Francisco sent his best carpenters to work on renovating Rosa's humble dwelling. Joaquim Benedito personally supervised every detail, intrigued but respectful of his employer's unusual decision. Rosa watched everything with eyes wet with disbelief. The broken tiles were replaced with complete and robust roofing. The packed earth floor gave way to hardwood flooring that gleamed golden under the sunlight. A wood-burning stove was installed in the kitchen, replacing the improvised clay oven. And the biggest surprise of all, a new cistern, which would guarantee clean water even during the severest droughts. "It's not much, Rosa," said Francisco, standing at the renovated door on an April afternoon, "but now you'll have more comfort." The 5 children ran around the newly fenced yard, their laughter echoing like bells of joy. Maria Joaquina, the youngest, clung to Rosa's leg with her chubby little arms, babbling words that only she understood. Jose, the oldest, approached Francisco respectfully. "Thank you, Sir Colonel," said the boy, extending his small but firm hand. "We'll never forget this kindness." Francisco shook the boy's hand, surprised by the maturity that early suffering had imprinted in those young eyes. "Are you helping Rosa with the little ones?" "Yes, sir, and she's teaching me to read properly. I already know how to write my full name, Jose dos Santos Silva." "Santos Silva?" Francisco arched his eyebrows. Rosa blushed slightly. "I gave the surname Santos to all of them, Colonel, and I added Silva because you have been so good to us." There was something in the way she pronounced Silva that made Francisco's heart race. A respectful intimacy, a veiled affection that hid behind the necessary formality between employer and employee. "I like it," he said simply. "Jose dos Santos Silva, a strong name for a brave boy." From that day on, the routine of San Benedito plantation changed in a subtle but profound way. Rosa continued arriving before dawn to care for Pedro and Isabel, but now there was no more rush to return home at the end of the day. The children from Pedras Creek came frequently to the plantation, especially on Sundays after Mass. Francisco found himself anxiously awaiting these moments. Watching Rosa interact with all 7 children, her 5 taken in plus Pedro and Isabel, was like witnessing a symphony of genuine affection. She made no difference between the master's children and the orphans she had taken from the street. All received the same care, the same attention, the same loving firmness when necessary. One May afternoon, while observing Rosa teach the first letters to Caterina on the main house veranda, Francisco realized something that surprised him. For the first time in 4 years, he felt complete. Not just comforted or resigned to his widowhood, but truly complete. "Papa," Isabel's voice drew him from his reveries. The 5-year-old girl approached with a drawing in her hands. "I made this for Miss Rosa." The drawing showed a house surrounded by small figures, clearly the children, and a tall woman in the center, with arms open as if wanting to embrace everyone. At the top of the sheet, Isabel had written in crooked letters, "Mama Rosa." Francisco felt a lump in his throat. "She'll like it very much, my daughter." "Papa, why doesn't Miss Rosa come live here with us?" asked Isabel, with the brutal innocence of children. "She takes better care of us than the other young ladies who came before." The question echoed in Francisco's mind throughout that entire night. Lying in his empty bed, staring at the carved wooden ceiling, he allowed himself, for the first time, to imagine Rosa not just as his children's nanny but as more, much more. But social conventions weighed like invisible chains. He was a respected colonel, owner of one of the largest coffee plantations in the Paraíba Valley. Rosa was a simple woman of humble origin, although she possessed qualities that the nobility of his era rarely demonstrated. What would the neighbors say? Father Antonio? Vasura's society? The following week, during Sunday lunch after Mass, Francisco made a decision that surprised even himself. He summoned Joaquim Benedito for a private conversation in the office. Joaquim, how long have you known Rosa? Since she arrived here, Colonel. 2.5 years. Serious girl, hard-working. I never saw her disrespect anyone or give reason for bad comments. And what do you think of her caring for those children? Joaquim scratched his graying beard, thoughtful. Look, Colonel, I've seen many good and bad things in this life. But what Rosa does with those children, that's saintly work. She gave family to those who had nothing, gave love to those who only knew abandonment. If that's not God's goodness working through a person, then I don't know anything anymore. And if I told you that I'm interested in her? The silence that followed was loaded with meaning. Joaquim studied Francisco's face with the wisdom of someone who had lived enough to understand that the human heart doesn't follow social rules. Colonel, with all respect, for 4 years, you've had a hole in your chest that nobody has managed to fill. I've seen many society ladies trying to win your attention, but you remain stone cold. Now I see the way you look at Rosa, and for the first time I see life in your eyes. But Joaquim, let me finish, Colonel. True love doesn't choose social class. It chooses heart. And Rosa's heart is the size of the world. Any man would be lucky to have such a woman by his side. That night, Francisco wrote a letter he would never send, but that he needed to write to clear his own thoughts. In it, he confessed to Rosa feelings he hadn't even admitted to himself. Rosa, I don't know when it happened, but you became much more than my children's nanny. You became the light that brought color back to my life. I see in you not just kindness, but the woman with whom I would like to build a new family. A family that would embrace all the children you love, all the dreams we carry, all the life we can still live together. But the letter remained stored in his desk drawer, waiting for the courage Francisco had not yet found to transform feelings into spoken words. What he didn't know was that Rosa, in her renovated house by Pedras Creek, was writing very similar words in her own diary. June arrived at San Benedito plantation, laden with the sweet perfume of coffee groves in bloom and the first rains of winter. The mornings dawned wrapped in a tenuous mist that gave the landscape an air of dreams, as if nature itself conspired to create moments of enchantment. Francisco had instituted a new tradition. Every Thursday after lunch, Rosa brought her 5 children to play with Pedro and Isabel in the plantation gardens. It was officially an educational gathering, as he explained to any neighbor who asked, where Rosa would teach the first letters to all 7 children under her responsibility. In truth, these were the most anticipated moments of the week for Francisco. Sitting on the main house veranda, pretending to read coffee production reports, he observed Rosa with growing admiration. There was a natural grace in the way she moved among the children, resolving small conflicts with gentle words, teaching José to help Benedito with the more difficult letters, drying Anna's tears when she became frustrated at not being able to write as well as she would like. "Rosa," he called to her one of those afternoons, when the children were playing Ring Around the Rosie on the lawn. "Have you ever thought about teaching at a real school?" She looked up from the slate where she was correcting Maria Joaquina's exercises, surprised by the question. "A school, Colonel? You teach better than many teachers I've known. You have patience, knowledge, and most importantly, you have love for what you do." Rosa blushed, lowering her gaze. "A woman like me doesn't teach at school, Colonel. That's for educated young ladies from good families." "Good families?" Francisco stood up, approaching her. "Rosa, you created a family of 5 abandoned children. You taught them to read, to have values, to be grateful. If that's not a good family, then I don't know what is." The silence that followed was filled by the children's laughter and the distant singing of slaves in the coffee fields. Rosa fidgeted with the pencil between her fingers, clearly moved by Francisco's words. "You have always been very kind to me, Colonel, more than I deserve." "Rosa," Francisco hesitated, struggling against the words he wanted to say. "You deserve much more than you imagine." There was something in the tone of his voice that made Rosa lift her eyes and meet his. For an eternal moment, they looked at each other in silence, and Francisco saw in her light brown eyes a reflection of the same feeling that consumed him. But Maria Joaquina stumbled at that exact moment, hurting her knee, and the moment shattered like glass against stone. Rosa ran to help the girl, and Francisco remained there with his heart beating hard, and the growing certainty that he could no longer pretend that Rosa was just his children's nanny. The following week, Francisco made a bold decision. He ordered a June festival at the plantation, the first social celebration since his wife's death. Officially, it was to fraternize with the workers and celebrate the good coffee harvest. In truth, It was an excuse to create an environment where he could interact with Rosa more naturally, away from neighbors' curious gazes. "A party, Colonel." Joachim raised his eyebrows when he received the instructions. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I want a bonfire, quadrille dancing, typical foods, and invite the families from around here. Let it be a real party." Joachim smiled mischievously. "And Rosa? Will she also participate in the quadrille?" Francisco pretended not to notice the irony in the foreman's question. "Rosa will take care of the children, as always." "Of course, Colonel, as always." The St. John's Festival of 1877 at São Benedito Plantation was talked about for weeks throughout the entire Paraíba Valley. Colored lanterns illuminated the yard. The bonfire crackled, sending golden sparks to the starry sky, and São Benedito's accordion, a freed slave who played like the angels, accompanied the quadrille steps. Francisco, wearing his best white linen outfit, circulated among the guests, greeting neighboring plantation owners and their wives, but his eyes constantly searched for Rosa. When he finally found her, his heart almost stopped. She wore a new dress, where she had gotten money to buy it, he didn't know, made of light blue cotton that highlighted her eyes and gave a natural elegance to her figure. Her hair was loose over her shoulders, shining in the lantern light, and she smiled while organizing the 7 children in their own small quadrille. "What a beautiful sight," murmured Donna Amelia, the neighboring colonel's wife, appearing beside Francisco. "Your nanny looks very elegant tonight." "Rosa has always been careful about her appearance," Francisco replied diplomatically. "Careful, yes." Donna Amelia smiled with poorly disguised malice. "Francisco, it's high time you found a new wife. A man of your position shouldn't remain single so long. When I find the right woman, Donna Amelia, I won't hesitate." "The right woman," she repeated, casting a significant look toward Rosa. "I hope you know what type of woman would be suitable for a man of your position, Francisco. Certain fantasies can be harmful to one's reputation." The message was clear. Francisco felt his blood boil, but maintained his composure. "My reputation is based on my character, Donna Amelia, and my character leads me to value kindness above birth." When the quadrille began, Francisco surprised everyone, and especially himself, by inviting Rosa to dance. "Colonel, I can't," she whispered, looking nervously around. "Do you know how to dance quadrille?" "Yes, but then you can." He extended his hand with a smile that brooked no refusal. "It's my party, Rosa, and I choose whom I want to dance with." Murmurs spread among the guests like waves on a lake, but Francisco didn't care. He guided Rosa to the center of the yard, where 4 other couples were already positioning themselves. When the music began, everything else disappeared. Rosa danced with a natural grace that left Francisco enchanted. Her movements were precise but delicate. Her eyes sparkled with joy, and when she smiled, truly smiled, it was as if the entire world lit up. During the balancé, when they stood face to face for a few seconds, Francisco murmured, "You look beautiful tonight, Rosa." The blush that took over her cheeks was more beautiful than any jewel Francisco had ever seen, adorning a society lady's neck. "Thank you, Colonel," she whispered back. "Francisco, my name is Francisco." "Francisco," she repeated, and the name sounded different on her lips, intimate and warm. The music ended to enthusiastic applause and some disapproving looks. Francisco accompanied Rosa back to where the children waited, all wide-eyed with surprise at having seen their Mama Rosa dancing with the Colonel. But before moving away, Francisco leaned slightly and whispered in her ear, "Rosa, I need to talk with you privately." Her heart raced. When he moved away, Rosa remained motionless for long seconds, her hand unconsciously touching the ear, where she still felt the warmth of his breath. The party continued until late hours, but for Francisco and Rosa, the world had been reduced to those few minutes of quadrille and the whispered words that promised a conversation that would change everything. In neighboring houses, malicious tongues were already commenting on the spectacle that Colonel Francisco had given by dancing with his nanny. But in the hearts of 2 people, seeds of true love had finally found fertile soil to germinate. The Sunday following the June festival dawned with a sky heavy with dark clouds threatening a storm. Francisco woke with a heavy heart, knowing that the conversation he had promised Rosa could no longer be postponed. The words whispered on the night of the festival echoed in his mind like an unavoidable commitment. After Mass at the main church of Vassouras, where he noticed the whispers and sidelong glances of parishioners, a clear consequence of his dance with Rosa, Francisco made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of returning directly to the plantation, He followed the path to Pedras Creek. Rosa was in the backyard of her renovated house, hanging clothes on the line while the 5 children played quietly in the shade of the mango tree that Francisco had ordered planted weeks before. She wore a simple raw cotton dress, her hair tied in a loose bun that let some strands escape to dance with the breeze. There was something deeply peaceful about that domestic scene that tightened Francisco's heart. "Rosa," he called, dismounting from his horse. She turned, surprised, dropping a sheet she was holding. "Colonel Francisco, I wasn't expecting you. I need to talk with you." The seriousness in his voice made Rosa instinctively gather the children and send them to play inside the house. They were left alone in the yard, under the weight of dark clouds and an almost palpable tension. Francisco walked to the wooden fence, resting his hands on it while struggling to find the right words. "Rosa, you know that in recent months many things have changed between us," he began without looking at her yet. "Yes, Colonel, you have been very generous. It's not about generosity." He turned to look at her. "It's about what I feel for you." The silence that followed was filled only by the distant rumble of thunder. Rosa brought her hand to her chest, as if trying to contain the heart that beat irregularly. "Colonel, Francisco, please call me Francisco. Francisco," she whispered, and the name sounded like a prayer on her lips. "You shouldn't say these things." "Why? Because I'm a colonel, and you're a nanny? Because society considers our difference an insurmountable abyss?" Rosa lowered her eyes, her hands trembling slightly. "Because it's true, we're from different worlds." Francisco took 2 steps in her direction, stopping very close but without touching her. "Rosa, look at me." Reluctantly, she raised her light brown eyes, and Francisco saw in them the same whirlwind of feelings that consumed him. "For the last 4 years, I've lived like a walking dead man. I fulfilled my obligations, took care of business, educated my children, but felt nothing, nothing." His voice caught slightly. "Until you arrived." "Francisco," Rosa whispered his name like a warning. "You brought life back to my house. You brought laughter, care, true love. My children smile more in one day with you than they smiled in months before, and I—" He hesitated, struggling with the vulnerability of the next words. "I began to feel my heart beat again." The first drops of rain began to fall, but neither of them moved. "What you're asking of me is impossible," Rosa murmured, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. "We're from different classes. You have a position to maintain, a reputation, and I'm just a simple woman with 5 abandoned children." "You're the most extraordinary woman I've ever known," Francisco exclaimed, his restraint finally breaking. "You transformed abandonment into family, want into love, despair into hope. You're worth more than all the society ladies combined." The rain now fell harder, but Francisco continued. "Rosa, I love you. I love your kindness, your strength, your dedication. I love the way you care for the children, how you teach with infinite patience, how you transform everything around you into something better. And I want—" His voice failed for a moment. "I want you to be my wife." The world seemed to stop. Rosa stood motionless, her eyes wide with shock. The rain fell harder and harder, soaking them both, but neither cared. "Your wife," she repeated, as if she couldn't believe what she had heard. "My wife, mother of my children, all 7. I want the 5 children you saved to become legally ours. I want to build with you a true family, based on love, not social conventions." Rosa closed her eyes, tears flowing freely down her face. "Francisco, you don't understand. If we marry, it will be a scandal. They'll say you've gone mad, that I seduced you for gain. They'll question your sanity, your position in society. And the children, they'll suffer from malicious comments. And do you think that matters more than our happiness, than the love we feel for each other?" "It's not about what I think," Rosa exploded, all her restraint breaking. "It's about reality. I love you, Francisco. I love you with all my soul. But loving isn't enough when the world conspires against us." The confession came out before she could contain it. Both were paralyzed by the weight of those words. "I love you, Francisco." Slowly, Francisco approached until he was inches from her. With infinite delicacy, he held her face between his hands. "You love me," he repeated, as if savoring each word. "That doesn't change anything," Rosa whispered, but didn't pull away from his hands. "It changes everything." Francisco leaned his forehead against hers. "Rosa, if you love me and I love you, we'll find a way. I don't care about society's opinion. I don't care about malicious comments. I only care about you, me, and our family." The rain now fell torrentially, turning the yard to mud. Francisco took Rosa's hand and led her to the covered porch of the house. "Give me a chance, Rosa. A chance to prove that love can overcome any prejudice." Rosa looked at him, soaked, vulnerable, declaring a love that defied all the norms of his era. She looked through the window at the 5 children who saw her as mother, thought of Pedro and Isabel who had embraced her as family. If we say yes," she began hesitantly, "what would it be like? We would marry in church, with Father Antonio's blessing. We would legally adopt the 5 children. You would become Rosa Pereira da Silva, Lady of São Benedito Plantation, and anyone who didn't respect our family wouldn't be welcome on our lands. And if we regretted it..." Francisco smiled for the first time since he had arrived. "Rosa, do you regret having saved Maria Joaquina, having taken in Jose, having given love to abandoned children?" "Never." "Then you'll never regret giving me the chance to love you as you deserve." Rosa remained silent for long minutes, watching the rain fall outside as if washing the world to start over. Finally, she turned to Francisco with a decision shining in her eyes. "If you promise that the 5 children will be legally adopted, that you'll never treat them differently from Pedro and Isabel, I promise. If you promise that our union will be blessed in church, that it will be a true marriage before God, I promise." Then, Rosa took a deep breath. "I accept being your wife, Francisco Pereira da Silva." The kiss that sealed that promise was gentle like the falling rain, deep like the love that united them, and strong like the courage they would need to face the world that would oppose them. Inside the house, 5 children peeked through the window, not fully understanding what they witnessed, but knowing instinctively that their lives were about to change forever, and for the better. The rain ceased before nightfall, leaving the air perfumed with the smell of wet earth and renewed hope. Francisco returned to São Benedito Plantation with a lighter heart than he had felt in years, but also with awareness of the monumental challenge he would face. His first stop was the office, where he summoned Joaquim Benedito for a conversation he knew would be crucial. "Joaquim," said Francisco, serving 2 glasses of the plantation's best cachaça, "I need your opinion on something very serious." The foreman accepted the glass with an attentive look. "Of course, Colonel. I'm going to marry Rosa." Joaquim almost choked on the cachaça, but quickly composed himself. He studied Francisco's determined face for long seconds before responding. "Colonel, may I speak frankly?" "Always. It's about time." Joaquim smiled broadly. "For months I've seen you looking at Rosa like a man in love. And she doesn't disguise it very well either." Francisco laughed, surprised by his foreman's simple reaction. "I thought you would advise me against it." "Colonel, I've seen Rosa transform 5 abandoned children into a family. I've seen her care for your children as if they were her own blood. I've seen her teach patience, kindness, gratitude. If that's not the quality of a wife, then I don't know what is." "But the comments, Joaquim. Society. Society be damned, begging your pardon. You're a good man, she's a good woman. The rest is talk from people who have nothing better to do." The next day, Francisco went to the main church of Vasuras for the most important conversation of his life. Father Antonio, a 60-year-old man with kind eyes and completely white hair, received him in his modest office behind the church. "Francisco, my son, good to see you. How are Pedro and Isabel?" "They're well, Father. Actually, it's about them and about other children that I came to talk." Father Antonio served coffee in simple porcelain cups while Francisco organized his thoughts. How could he confess to God's representative his plans that would challenge all social conventions? "Father, do you know Rosa Maria dos Santos?" "Of course. Your children's nanny. An exemplary woman. I saw her at Sunday Mass caring for those 5 children she took in. It's rare to find such Christian charity in our days. It's exactly about that I want to talk. Father, I would like to marry Rosa." The priest paused in bringing the cup to his lips. He looked fixedly at Francisco, as if trying to decipher whether he had heard correctly. "Marry your nanny?" "The woman I love," Francisco corrected firmly. "A woman who demonstrates daily the purest Christian values. Charity, kindness, dedication to family." Father Antonio placed the cup on the table and crossed his hands. "Francisco, do you understand the social implications of what you're proposing?" "I understand. But I also understand that before God, there is no difference in social class. There is only true love and blessed union." "That's true, my son. Before the Almighty, we are all equal. But we live in human society, with all its imperfections and prejudices." Francisco leaned forward, his voice charged with emotion. "Father, for 4 years I've been dead inside. Rosa brought life back to my soul. And more than that, She created a true family where there was only abandonment. 5 orphaned children found love and education in her arms. How can I not honor such a woman? The priest remained silent for long minutes, fingers intertwined while pondering. Francisco waited, knowing that this decision would be crucial to his plans. "And the children she took in?" Father Antonio finally asked. "They will be legally adopted by both of us. They will become legitimate children with rights to inheritance, education, the family name. 7 children in total, the 2 I already have, and the 5 Rosa saved from the streets." The priest's eyes lit up. 7 children, a numerous family blessed by God. Exactly. Rosa has already proven to be a better mother to my children than many society ladies would be, and I learned to love those 5 children, as if they were my own flesh and blood. Father Antonio stood up and walked to the window, observing the square where some children played. "Francisco, in my 40 years of priesthood, I've seen many marriages motivated by convenience, interest, family pressure. Rarely have I seen a man speak of true love with such conviction." He turned to Francisco. "Do you have absolute certainty that you love this woman?" "I do, Father. I love her kindness, her strength, her dedication. I love how she transforms everything around her into something better, and I love how she made me feel like a complete man again." "And does she return these feelings?" "She does. Yesterday she confessed that she also loves me." The priest nodded slowly. "Then I will bless you, but with 2 conditions." "What are they?" "First, the marriage must be performed here, in the main church, with all due solemnity. Nothing discreet that gives rise to comments about shame or embarrassment." "I completely agree." "Second, you must be prepared to face criticism and prejudice with Christian dignity, not responding with anger, but with the example of a union blessed by God." "We will be prepared." Father Antonio extended his hand to Francisco. "Then you have my blessing, my son, and may God bless this family you will build together." The next morning, a hot Sunday in July, Francisco dressed in his best clothes and headed to the house by Pedras Creek. He carried with him a blue velvet box he had kept for years, the most precious inheritance left by his grandmother. Rosa awaited him on the porch, wearing the blue dress she had worn at the June festival. The 5 children were arranged around her like little soldiers, clearly instructed about the importance of that moment. "Rosa Maria dos Santos," Francisco said solemnly, kneeling before her on the newly varnished wooden porch. "Do you accept being my wife before God and men?" With trembling hands, he opened the box, revealing a simple but elegant gold ring with a small engraved cross, his grandmother's engagement ring, which had belonged to the Pereira da Silva family for 3 generations. Rosa covered her mouth with her hands, tears flowing freely down her face. "Francisco, do you accept sharing with me not only life, but also the responsibility and love for these 5 children you saved?" "I accept," she whispered, extending her left hand. Francisco slipped the ring onto her ring finger, sealing a commitment that would challenge all the conventions of his era. The 5 children erupted in applause and shouts of joy. Maria Joaquina ran into Rosa's arms. Jose respectfully shook Francisco's hand, and for the first time since they had known each other, called him Papa Francisco. On that blessed Sunday in July 1877, a new family was officially born, a family that would prove to the world that true love can flourish in any soil, cross any barrier, and transform abandonment into belonging. But Francisco and Rosa still couldn't imagine the social storms they would have to face before reaching the altar. The 2 months following the engagement were a whirlwind of preparations, whispered comments, and unexpected challenges. News of the marriage between Colonel Francisco and his nanny spread through the region like wildfire in a sugarcane field, provoking reactions ranging from poorly disguised curiosity to explicit indignation. Donna Amelia, the most influential neighbor in Vasura society, made a point of visiting Francisco one August afternoon, accompanied by 2 other ladies concerned about the region's reputation. "Francisco," she said, sitting in the visiting room of São Benedito plantation, fanning herself with an ostrich feather fan, "we hope you'll reconsider this hasty decision." "There's nothing hasty about my decision, Donna Amelia. I've known Rosa for more than 2 years. I know exactly what type of woman I'm marrying." "But Francisco," intervened Donna Eugenia, another local matron, "you're a respected colonel. Your late wife was a baron's daughter, and now you intend to marry a nanny who picks up street children?" Francisco felt his blood boil but kept his voice calm. I intend to marry a woman who demonstrates daily virtues I rarely find among society ladies. Kindness, true charity, unconditional love for needy children. But what about your reputation and your children's future in society? My children will have the best possible future, a mother who truly loves them and 5 siblings who will learn from an early age the values of gratitude and solidarity. The ladies left frustrated, but Francisco knew the social pressure was just beginning. The following week, a formal letter arrived from some regional plantation owners, suggesting he reconsider his position in the name of maintaining local good customs. The letter went straight into the fireplace. Meanwhile, Rosa faced her own challenges. Some village women treated her coldly when she went to market, whispering comments about woman who takes advantage of a widowed master's kindness. Others, mainly the simpler ones, congratulated her discreetly, seeing in her a victory against social injustices. Rosa, Donna Benedita, a washerwoman who had known her since childhood, told her, "Don't mind those snake tongues. You're a good woman who deserves to be happy, and that colonel is lucky to have found someone like you." Rosa smiled in those moments, but the nights were long and full of insecurity. Was she really worthy of becoming a plantation lady? Could she overcome the social differences? What if Francisco regretted it after the marriage? It was on one of those anguishing nights that Francisco appeared at her house, immediately perceiving her distress. "What troubles you, my love?" Rosa hesitated before speaking. It was the first time he had called her that. "My love," and the words fell on her heart like balm. "Francisco, sometimes I think I'm not good enough for you. I don't know how to be a colonel's wife. I don't know society's ways." Francisco took her hands in his. "Rosa, do you think I need a wife who knows how to organize afternoon teas, or who knows high society gossip?" "I don't know what you need," she confessed. "I need a woman who loves my children as you do. I need someone who brings kindness to our house, who teaches true values, who transforms our plantation into a real family. And you've been doing that for more than 2 years. But what if I embarrass you in front of other colonels?" Francisco smiled, delicately kissing her hands. "Rosa, you've already made me prouder than any woman could when I see how you care for the 5 children, how you teach with patience, how you transform suffering into love. That fills me with a pride no social position could give." The wedding date was set for September 15, 1877, on a spring morning when yellow ipe trees bloomed throughout the region. Rosa spent the week before the ceremony sewing her wedding dress, simple white linen but adorned with bobbin lace she made herself during the long nights of preparation. On the wedding morning, Francisco woke with absolute certainty in his heart. He dressed in his best clothes, black English cashmere suit, embroidered vest, felt top hat, and went to the main church an hour before the ceremony. The church was decorated with wild flowers picked by the children themselves, daisies, small sunflowers, sprigs of rosemary and basil that perfumed the environment. Father Antonio, dressed in his finest liturgical vestments, waited at the altar with a paternal smile. The guests were few but significant. Joaquim Benedito as Francisco's best man, Donna Benedita as Rosa's maid of honor, some closer neighbors, and of course the 7 children in the first pew, Pedro and Isabel beside the 5 adoptive siblings, all dressed in new clothes sewn especially for the occasion. When Rosa entered the church, Francisco felt as if he saw an angel descending from heaven. The simple but elegant dress highlighted her natural beauty, the tulle veil framed her radiant face, and in her light brown eyes shone a happiness that illuminated the entire nave. The ceremony was simple but moving. When the moment for vows came, Francisco spoke with a firm voice. "Rosa Maria, I promise to love and protect you and all the children you brought into my life. I promise to honor our union before God and men, and to build with you a family based on true love." Rosa, with tears of happiness in her eyes, responded, "Francisco, I promise to be your faithful companion, dedicated mother to our children, and guardian of the values that united us. I promise to transform our house into a home full of love and gratitude." "I pronounce you husband and wife," said Father Antonio solemnly. "Francisco, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was gentle, respectful, but charged with all the emotion repressed for months. When they separated, Rosa was no longer Rosa Maria dos Santos, but Rosa Pereira da Silva, Lady of São Benedito Plantation. The celebration was held in the plantation yard, with congada performed by freed slaves, folk songs played by old Benedito, and an abundant table with typical regional foods. The 5 children danced and laughed until they could no more, finally understanding they would have not just a mother, but a real father. When night fell and the last guests departed, Francisco and Rosa walked hand in hand to the main house, followed by the 7 children who now officially composed their family. "Mrs. Pereira da Silva," Francisco whispered in Rosa's ear before entering. "Are you ready for our new life?" Rosa looked at the 5 children who followed her trustingly, at Pedro and Isabel, who already called her Mama, and then at the man who had transformed her dreams into reality. "I'm ready for our entire life, my husband." And so, on a starry September night in 1877, officially began the story of the most united and prosperous family in the Paraíba Valley. A family built not on blood or social position, but on true love that transforms impossibilities into everyday miracles. The autumn of 1878 came to São Benedito plantation, bringing with it the first visible transformations of the new Pereira da Silva family. The main house, which for 4 years had lived submerged in silent melancholy, now constantly echoed with children's laughter, animated conversations during meals, and the comforting sound of Rosa humming while supervising domestic activities. Francisco observed these changes with a profound contentment he had never imagined possible. During the first months of marriage, Rosa had demonstrated an extraordinary capacity to transform not only the house's atmosphere, but the entire dynamic of the property. The mornings always began with the family's coffee gathered around the great jacaranda table in the dining room. 7 children of varying ages, from Maria Joaquina, now 2½, to José, 13, sat in ascending order, each with their morning tasks well defined by Rosa. "Catarina, you and Anna will help me with the garden today," Rosa would say, serving corn porridge with brown sugar. "Benedito and Pedro can take care of the new chicks that were born yesterday." "And me, Mama Rosa?" Isabel would ask, Francisco's biological daughter, who since the marriage had naturally adopted the new mother. "You're going to teach me how to make those beautiful embroideries you learned from Grandma." Francisco smiled, seeing how Rosa managed to give each child the feeling of being special and necessary. There was no difference in treatment between biological and adopted children. All were simply children, with equal rights and responsibilities. The biggest surprise came when Francisco decided to legally formalize the adoption of the 5 children. The process, which he expected to be complicated and lengthy, was surprisingly simple. The judge of Vasuras, impressed with the family's stable economic situation and the children's evident well-being, quickly approved the documentation. José dos Santos Silva, Catarina dos Santos Silva, Benedito dos Santos Silva, Ana dos Santos Silva, and Maria Joaquina dos Santos Silva, read the clerk during the official ceremony. Henceforth, legitimate children of Francisco Pereira da Silva and Rosa Pereira da Silva, with all rights inherent to filiation. Rosa wept copiously throughout the entire ceremony. Those 5 children she had taken from the streets, motivated only by kindness of heart, now had complete names, guaranteed inheritance, and secure future. More than that, they had a true family. The social impact of the marriage, contrary to pessimistic predictions, was gradually positive. Initially, some neighboring plantation owners maintained a respectful but cold distance. However, as months passed, the evident prosperity of São Benedito plantation and the harmony of the Pereira da Silva family began to attract positive attention. "Francisco," commented Colonel Alberto, owner of the neighboring plantation, during a visit in March 1879, "I must acknowledge that your Rosa is an exceptional woman. I've never seen children so well educated and happy." It was true. The 7 children demonstrated natural politeness, genuine mutual affection, and gratitude for life that impressed all visitors. José, the oldest, developed as a responsible and intelligent young man. Catarina and Ana helped Rosa in caring for the younger ones, showing precocious but healthy maturity. Benedito and Pedro were inseparable, creating a fraternal friendship Francisco had never seen before among his children. But the greatest transformation was happening in the plantation's own production. Rosa, with her experience in domestic administration and her attentive eye for details, began suggesting improvements Francisco had never considered. "Francisco," she said one night while they reviewed the property's account books together, "what if we planted a larger garden? We could sell the surplus in the village and still guarantee more varied food for our family and workers." "That's a good idea. Do you understand planting? I learned from my father when I was a child, And the girls can help me. It will be a good lesson about work and responsibility. Rosa's garden quickly became famous in the region. Her knowledge of medicinal plants, inherited from childhood, transformed a small area behind the main house into a true natural pharmacy. Chamomile to calm, lemon balm for digestion, arnica for bruises. Rosa cultivated everything with the care of someone who understood that well-treated land repaid in abundance. In 1880, 3 years after the marriage, São Benedito plantation had become one of the most prosperous in the Paraíba Valley. Coffee production had reached 45,000 arrobas annually, an increase of almost 30% compared to the years before the marriage. Francisco attributed this success not only to hard work, but to the atmosphere of harmony and motivation that Rosa had brought to the property. "You know, Joaquim," Francisco commented to his foreman one May afternoon, "I never believed a happy house could influence plantation productivity so much. It's that people work better when they see the master is happy, Colonel, and the freed slaves comment among themselves about how Mrs. Rosa treats them with respect, always asking about their families, caring for sick children. That creates loyalty money can't buy." Rosa had, in fact, revolutionized work relations on the plantation. She established a basic education system for workers' children, teaching them to read and write on Sunday afternoons. She created a small infirmary where she personally cared for the sick and injured, using her knowledge of medicinal plants. "Mama Rosa," Jose said one afternoon, helping her organize natural medicines, "you saved many more people than just the 5 of us, didn't you?" Rosa smiled, caressing the hair of the boy, who had become her right hand in plantation activities. "Jose, when you care for a person with love, that love spreads. She'll treat other people better and so on. It's like planting seeds of kindness. What if a bad person doesn't want to be good? Then we continue being good to them until they have no choice but to return the kindness. Evil always loses to good, Jose. It may take time, but it always loses." In December 1880, the family received news that filled everyone with joy. Rosa was expecting a baby. It would be the couple's first biological child, but Francisco made clear from the first moment that the child would be just one more member of the numerous family they already had. "One more little brother or sister," he announced to the 7 children gathered in the living room. "Our family is going to grow even more." Maria Joaquina, now 5 and talkative as a little bird, clapped enthusiastically. "I'm going to teach him to play with dolls." "What if it's a boy?" Pedro asked, laughing. "Then I'll teach him to play with toy soldiers," the girl replied with childhood's irrefutable logic. Rosa observed the children's reaction with emotion. There was no jealousy, competition, or fear of being replaced, only genuine joy for the arrival of one more family member. That night, lying in their matrimonial bed, Francisco delicately caressed Rosa's still small belly. "Thank you," he whispered, "for the baby, for everything, for transforming my house into a home, for giving siblings to my children, for creating the happiest family in the Paraíba Valley, for teaching me that true love multiplies when divided." Rosa kissed her husband's forehead. "Francisco, when I found those 5 abandoned children, I thought I was just fulfilling my Christian obligation. I never imagined I was planting the seeds of my own happiness." "Our happiness," he corrected. "Ours and everyone who is part of this blessed family." Outside, the night wind blew gently through the flowering coffee groves, carrying with it the sweet perfume of prosperity and the promise that the best days of the Pereira da Silva family were still to come. The year 1881 brought significant changes to São Benedito plantation. In June, Francisco Jr. was born, a robust boy with dark hair and bright eyes, who from his first days of life showed he had inherited his father's determination and his mother's sweetness. The birth was assisted by Donna Benedita, the region's most experienced midwife, with Rosa being cared for like a queen by her 7 older children. Jose, now 15, had become a true right hand to Francisco in plantation administration. Intelligent and dedicated, he had learned to read production reports, calculate costs, and supervise small groups of workers. Francisco saw in him not just an adoptive son, but a future partner in the family business. "Jose," Francisco said one July morning, while they rode together through the coffee groves, "I want you to start accompanying coffee sale negotiations. It's important you learn all aspects of the business." "Yes, Papa." The boy had naturally adopted this affectionate treatment. "May I ask something?" "Always." "Why do you treat me the same as Pedro?" "I mean, I know I'm not your blood son." Francisco stopped his horse and looked seriously at Jose. Jose, do you think I love you less than I love Pedro? No, sir, it's just that sometimes I think Jose dos Santos Silva. Francisco interrupted him, using the full name as he did in solemn moments. The day your mother Rosa introduced you and your siblings to me, my heart opened to 5 children who needed a father. Since then, you are no less my son than Pedro or Isabel, and Francisco Jr. won't be more my son than you. Blood doesn't make family, Jose. Love makes family. The boy smiled, his eyes shining with emotion. Thank you, Papa, for everything. Meanwhile, Rosa flourished in her role as family matriarch. With Francisco Jr. nursing peacefully in her lap, she supervised the other children's activities with the mastery of a conductor, orchestrating a complex but harmonious symphony. Caterina, at 10, had revealed special talent for cooking and helped the plantation's cook prepare family meals. Anna, at 12, showed aptitude for embroidery and sewing, creating delicate pieces that Rosa sold discreetly in the village, reverting the profit to a children's education fund. Benedito and Pedro, inseparable at 8 and 11 respectively, had become specialists in caring for the plantation's animals. Isabel, at 8, demonstrated the same love for letters as Rosa, spending hours reading and teaching first words to little Francisco Jr. Maria Joaquina, now 6, was the joy of the house. Talkative, affectionate, and clever, she circulated among all family members, distributing hugs and smiles that illuminated even the most difficult days. Mama Rosa, she said one August afternoon, while helping organize the library Francisco had installed in the house, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. How so, my love? I want to find little children alone and give them a family, like you did with me. Rosa felt her eyes moisten. She knelt at the girl's height and hugged her tenderly. Maria Joaquina, you already do that every day when you love your siblings and when you're kind to all the people you meet. The love you received, you're spreading to the world. That same year, Francisco made a decision that surprised the entire region. He built a school on the plantation. Not a simple classroom, but a real school, with desks, blackboard, library, and adequate teaching materials. Rosa will be the teacher, he announced during a meeting with neighboring plantation owners. She has knowledge, patience, and vocation for teaching, and the school will be free for all workers' children in the region. The reaction was mixed. Some plantation owners questioned the need to educate simple people, while others praised the innovative initiative. But Rosa was determined to make the school a success. The São Benedito Plantation School was inaugurated in March 1882, with 15 students between 6 and 12 years old. Rosa taught Portuguese, basic mathematics, history and geography, plus notions of morality and civics. Classes took place in the afternoon, after morning work on the plantation. Children, Rosa said on the first day of class, you're here because education is the only thing no one can take from you. Learn with dedication, because knowledge will be the key that opens all the doors of your lives. Jose attended classes as a monitor, helping younger students and taking advantage to deepen his own knowledge. Francisco visited the school regularly, impressed with the students' rapid progress. In December 1882, the school's first graduation was a memorable event. 5 children, sons of plantation workers, managed to read small texts fluently and solve basic math problems. For families who had never dreamed of formal education for their children, this represented a miracle. Donna Rosa, said Severino, father of one of the graduates, you changed my boy's future. How can I thank you? Keep sending him to school, Severino, and teach at home the values he learns here. That's how you build a better future. But Rosa's most ambitious project was still to come. In 1883, she proposed to Francisco the creation of a sewing workshop for women in the region. Francisco, many workers' wives have free time during the day. If I taught them to sew more elaborate pieces, they could earn extra income for their families. It's an excellent idea. Where do you get so many good ideas? Rosa smiled, rocking Francisco Jr., now 2 years old and running around the house like a little hurricane. From necessity, my love. When you see people with potential being wasted, you naturally think of ways to take advantage of it. The sewing workshop operated 3 mornings a week in a room attached to the school. Rosa taught from basic stitches to elaborate embroidery, including cutting and sewing clothes. The pieces produced were sold in the village and neighboring plantations, generating significant income for participating families. In 1884, Antonia was born, the couple's second biological daughter, a girl with golden hair and blue eyes like Francisco's, who completed the numerous family's happiness. With 9 children in total, the main house buzzed with constant activity, but also with unconditional love. 9 children, Francisco murmured one night, watching Rosa lull Antonia while the other children played in the living room. 7 years ago, I was a lonely man with 2 sad children. Today I have a family that fills every corner of this house with joy, and all of them children of our love, Francisco. Each one came to us in a different way, but all were received with the same affection. Jose, now 16, approached respectfully. "Papa, may I talk with you?" "Of course, my son. I wanted to thank you for giving me a family, a name, an education, for teaching me I can be anything I want to be." Francisco hugged the young man who had become his pride. "Jose, you earned all of this with your effort and character. I just gave the opportunity. The merit is yours." "Ours, sir," Rosa gently corrected. "The merit belongs to our family, which grew together, supported each other mutually, and proved that love multiplies when divided." On that 1884 night, the Pereira da Silva family represented much more than a love story that overcame social prejudices. It represented living proof that a better society is possible when people extend their hand to those in need, when the heart overcomes conventions, and when true love transforms impossibilities into everyday miracles. The seeds planted by Rosa when she took in 5 abandoned children had germinated a leafy tree under whose shade many other families found inspiration, education, and hope for a more just and prosperous future. The year 1885 began with an unexpected surprise that would test once more the Pereira da Silva family's capacity to transform challenges into opportunities for growth. In February, during a visit to the village of Vassouras, Rosa encountered a scene that broke her heart. A girl of about 4 years old, thin and frightened, wandering the streets with torn clothes and a lost look. "What's your name, dear?" Rosa knelt at the child's height, speaking with the soft voice she always used with little ones. "Hope," whispered the girl, shrinking like a wounded bird. "And where are your parents, Hope?" "They went to heaven when the house caught fire," the child replied with childhood's devastating simplicity. Rosa felt her heart tighten. It was Maria Joaquina again, Jose again, all her children again. It was the calling her soul knew too well to ignore. "Francisco," she said that night after putting Hope to sleep in an improvised bed in the girl's room. "She has no one else." Francisco looked through the window of the room where the girl slept, observing how Isabel and Maria Joaquina had naturally adopted the small orphan, sharing toys and affection with her. 10 children, he murmured, more to himself than to Rosa. "Is it too many?" Rosa asked hesitantly. Francisco turned to her with a smile that dispelled all doubts. "Rosa, 8 years ago you taught me that love has no limit. If our heart has space for one more child, our house will too. So Hope dos Santos Silva will be our 10th daughter." Hope's adoption was the catalyst for an even greater transformation at São Benedito plantation. Francisco realized that his family had become more than a family. It was a living example that social change was possible through individual actions motivated by love. He then decided to institutionalize this mission by officially creating the São Benedito home, attached to the plantation, destined to temporarily or permanently shelter orphaned or abandoned children from the region. "It won't be an orphanage in the traditional sense," Francisco explained to Father Antonio, who had come to bless the project. "It will be an extension of our family. The children we shelter will receive education, affection, and when possible, will be adopted by families who can truly love them." The São Benedito home was inaugurated in June 1885 in a simple but moving ceremony. The structure could accommodate up to 15 children, with dormitories separated by age, study room, dining room, and a recreation area. Rosa would be the director, assisted by the older daughters, Caterina, Anna, and Isabel, who would help care for the younger ones. The first child to arrive besides Hope was a 7-year-old boy named Gabriel, whose parents had died of typhoid fever. Then came 2 sisters, Beatriz and Clara, 5 and 6 years old, abandoned at the door of Vassouras church. "Mama Rosa," said Maria Joaquina, now 9 and one of the home's most dedicated assistants, "why are there so many children without families?" Rosa stopped combing Beatriz's hair to answer her daughter's profound question. "Maria Joaquina, sometimes sad things happen in life. Illnesses, accidents, poverty. When that happens to parents, children are left alone. Our job is to care for them until they find a new family or until they grow enough to care for themselves. What if they don't find a new family? Then we'll be their family forever. Jose, now 17 and practically a grown man, naturally assumed the role of older brother to all the home's children. He taught the boys to care for animals, to read and write, and mainly taught by example what gratitude and determination meant. "Gabriel," he said one afternoon to the youngest boy, "do you know what our secret is here at São Benedito home? What? We don't keep thinking about what we lost. We stay grateful for what we gained. You lost your parents, who are in heaven taking care of you, but you gained a huge family here on earth that will love you forever." The reputation of São Benedito home spread quickly through the region. Other plantations began sending orphaned children, always accompanied by generous donations for project maintenance. Some plantation owners, inspired by Francisco and Rosa's example, created their own social assistance programs. Colonel Alberto, the neighbor who had initially criticized Francisco's marriage, became one of the home's greatest supporters. "Francisco," he said during an August visit, "I must admit I was wrong about your Rosa. She not only became an excellent wife for you, but a blessing for our entire region." "Rosa was always exceptional, Alberto. I just had the luck to recognize it, and the courage to face society's prejudices. Today I see that your marriage wasn't a scandal, it was an example." In September 1885, the plantation school had expanded to serve 40 students, including children from the home and workers' children from 3 neighboring plantations. Rosa, now 36, radiated profound satisfaction seeing so many children learning to read, write, and dream of a better future. "Teacher Rosa," said one of the students during Portuguese class, "my father said that before you came, poor children didn't learn to read. Is that true?" "It was more difficult," Rosa replied diplomatically, "but it's never too late to learn. Your father can also come to evening classes if he wants." Evening classes for adults had begun spontaneously when some parents asked to learn alongside their children. 3 times a week, Rosa taught basic reading and mathematics to rural workers who had never had the opportunity to study. Francisco observed all this with growing admiration. His wife had not only transformed his personal life, she had revolutionized the entire social structure of the region. São Benedito plantation had become a center of education, social assistance, and human progress. "Rosa," he said one October night, while they walked through the garden illuminated by the full moon, "when we married 8 years ago, I thought I was gaining a wife and a mother for my children." "And wasn't that what you gained?" Francisco stopped and held her hands. "I gained much more. I gained a visionary who is creating a better world around us. I gained a woman who proves daily that a determined person can change hundreds of other lives. We changed, Francisco, both of us together, with our family. I alone could never have accomplished all this. Maybe, but it was your kindness that planted the first seed. It was your love that watered the soil. Everything that flourished here was born from your generous heart." At that moment, they heard laughter coming from the main house. It was story time before bed, when all the children, both the children and those from the home, gathered in the living room to hear Caterina read adventures from books Francisco bought, especially for these moments. 10 children of ours and 6 from the home," Rosa murmured. 16 children who sleep every night knowing they are loved. And hundreds of others who will grow up knowing how to read and write thanks to the school. And dozens of women who gained economic independence with the sewing workshop. Francisco embraced Rosa from behind, both contemplating the illuminated house where their lives were completed. "Do you know what's the best thing about all this?" "What?" "It's that this is just the beginning. Our family will still grow. Our school will still educate many generations. Our home will still shelter many children. The love we planted here will multiply beyond what we can imagine." Rosa leaned against her husband's chest, feeling the deep truth of those words. What had begun as a simple love story between a widowed colonel and a kind nanny had transformed into a silent revolution that would change the destiny of countless lives. And the most beautiful thing was knowing that this revolution would continue through each child who learned to read, each family that was strengthened, each act of kindness that multiplied, because true love, once planted, grows infinitely. The autumn of 1886 brought to São Benedito plantation news that filled the entire family with pride. José dos Santos Silva, at 18, had been accepted to the law school of Largo de São Francisco in São Paulo. He was the first young man from the region, son of rural workers, to win a place in higher education. The farewell was emotional. The entire family, the 10 official children and the 6 children from the home, gathered in the plantation yard to bless the departure of the oldest son. "José," said Francisco, placing his hands on the young man's shoulders, "you will carry with us not only the family name, but proof that education and determination can overcome any origin. Papa, I promise I will honor everything you and Mama Rosa taught me, and when I graduate, I'll return to help other children have the same opportunities I had." Rosa embraced the son her heart had adopted almost 10 years ago, when he was just a 12-year-old orphan boy. "José, you already honor our family every day. Go study, realize your dreams, but never forget that here will always be your home." "I'll never forget, Mama Rosa. You gave me much more than a home. You gave me the certainty that I can be anything I want to be." While the cart moved away carrying José toward the train station, the younger children cried and waved. Francisco Jr., now 5, asked Rosa, "Mama, is José really going to become a doctor?" "Yes, my son. And one day you can also be a doctor, if you study hard and dedicate yourself. I want to be a doctor like José, and then I want to come back to take care of children without families, just like you do." Rosa smiled, perceiving how family values were naturally transmitted from generation to generation. Francisco Jr. had grown up seeing love in action and naturally wanted to reproduce that model. With José in São Paulo, Catarina, now 15, assumed greater responsibility both in the school and in the home. And, intelligent and mature, she demonstrated the same educational vocation as Rosa, dividing her time between teaching younger children and helping in the administration of the plantation's social projects. "Mama Rosa," she said one May afternoon, "I wanted to talk about my future." "Of course, my love, what have you been thinking?" "I want to be a real teacher. I want to study at a normal school and then return to expand our work here." Francisco, who was listening to the conversation from the living room doorway, entered smiling. "Catarina, it would be an honor for our family to have 2 officially trained teachers." The formal education of daughters was a delicate issue in that era's society. Women rarely pursued advanced studies, limiting themselves to domestic knowledge considered appropriate for the female sex. But Francisco and Rosa always encouraged all children, boys and girls, to seek education. "Does Anna also want to study?" Francisco asked. "Anna has talent for embroidery and sewing. She wants to learn more advanced techniques to expand our workshop. Maybe she can study with the French nuns who came to Petropolis." "And Isabel?" Rosa smiled proudly. "Isabel wants to be a doctor." The silence that followed was broken by Francisco's amused laughter. "A doctor? Our Isabel was always determined." "Papa, do you think it's crazy?" Isabel, at 12, appeared in the doorway with 2-year-old Antonia in her arms. "I think it's ambition, my daughter. And ambition based on goodwill is always welcome in this family." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a carriage at the plantation gate. It was an unexpected visit. Dr. Eduardo Ferreira, doctor from Vassouras, accompanied by an elegant lady Francisco didn't recognize. "Colonel Francisco, Donna Rosa, doctor." Eduardo descended from the carriage smiling. "I'd like to introduce Donna Mariana Alves, director of the capital's charitable society." Donna Mariana, a lady of about 50, with graying hair styled in an elegant bun and intelligent eyes, greeted the couple with evident interest. "Colonel Donna Rosa, I came from São Paulo specifically to learn about your work. The fame of São Benedito plantation reached the capital." "Fame?" Rosa asked modestly. "São Benedito home is talked about in all the province's philanthropic circles. A social assistance model that combines education, family love, and future perspective for abandoned children." During the visit, Donna Mariana observed everything with a professional eye: the functioning school, the sewing workshop, the home with well-cared-for and happy children, the prosperous plantation where all projects coexisted harmoniously. "It's impressive," she commented during dinner. "In 10 years you created a model the government should study and reproduce. We just followed our hearts," Rosa replied humbly. "Seeing needy children, we couldn't turn away. But you transformed heart into method, love into organized system. That's rare." Francisco served more wine to the visitor. "Donna Mariana, may I ask what exactly is the purpose of your visit?" The lady smiled mysteriously. "I have a proposal for you. The charitable society wants to finance the creation of 3 more homes modeled on São Benedito in other regions of the province. You would train the responsible parties and supervise the implementation." Rosa and Francisco exchanged surprised glances. It was an opportunity to multiply their work far beyond what they had dreamed. "It would be an honor. Francisco replied after brief reflection. But we have one condition. What? The model must be followed entirely. No traditional orphanages where children are just fed and sheltered. There must be education, true affection, future perspective, and mainly respect for each child's dignity. Exactly what we hope to hear. Rosa leaned forward, her eyes shining with new possibility. Donna Mariana, may I suggest something? Certainly. How about we also include lay teacher training? Many regions don't have schools, but they have people of goodwill who could teach if they received adequate training. Donna Mariana clapped discreetly. Perfect. A complete program. Homes for orphans, schools for needy communities, and educator training. Do you accept? Francisco looked at Rosa, seeing in her eyes the same determination that had made him fall in love years before. We accept. That night, after Donna Mariana retired to the guest room, Francisco and Rosa walked through the garden under the stars. Rosa, do you realize what's happening? Our small family is becoming something much bigger. Much bigger. And doesn't that frighten you? Rosa stopped and looked at the main house, illuminated by the windows where their children slept peacefully. Francisco, 10 years ago, I was a single nanny secretly caring for 5 orphans. Today I'm mother to 10 children, director of a school, administrator of a home, and apparently I'm going to become a consultant for a provincial social assistance program. And does that answer my question? It does. Rosa smiled radiantly. It doesn't frighten me because I know I'm not alone. I have you by my side. I have our family supporting me. And mainly, I know we're doing the right thing. Francisco kissed her tenderly under the starlight. Then let's change the world, my love. One child at a time, one family at a time, one community at a time. Let's change the world, Rosa agreed. Because that's what love does. It transforms one life, which transforms another life, which transforms another, until the entire world is different. Inside the house, all the children slept peacefully, unconscious that they were part of something much greater than a happy family. They were the seed of a silent revolution that would spread throughout Imperial Brazil, proving that love in action can change history. The year 1887 marked a transformation in the scale of the Pereira da Silva family's projects. What had begun as a personal love story now influenced social policies throughout Rio de Janeiro province. The first São Benedito home replica was inaugurated in March in the city of Barra Mansa, under Rosa and Francisco's direct supervision. The trip to Barra Mansa was the first time the family separated for more than a few days. Rosa departed accompanied by Catarina, now 16, and officially an assistant in social projects, leaving Francisco caring for the other children with help from Ana and Isabel. Papa, asked 6-year-old Francisco Jr. on the third night of Rosa's absence, why does Mama have to go away to care for other children? Francisco sat his son on his lap, carefully choosing his words. Francisco Jr., do you remember when we brought Hope home? Yes. She was very sad and hungry. And how did you feel when she became happy here with us? The boy thought for a moment. I became happy too. That's exactly what Mama Rosa is doing in Barra Mansa. She's teaching other people to care for sad and hungry children, so they can also become happy. And then she comes back. She always comes back. Our family is the most important place in the world to her, just as she is the most important to us. Meanwhile, in Barra Mansa, Rosa worked tirelessly to establish standards for the new home. The property donated by the charitable society was ample and well located, but the challenge lay in forming the team that would care for the children. Donna Maria, Rosa told the future home director, a 40-year-old widow who had lost 2 children to disease, the first thing you need to understand is that these aren't sheltered children. They're temporary or permanent children, depending on each case. What do you mean, Donna Rosa? Some children might be adopted by families. Others will grow up here until adulthood. But all, while they're with us, must feel truly loved, not just cared for. Catarina attended the orientations with growing admiration for her adoptive mother. Mama Rosa, how did you learn all this? Learning from each child I cared for, my daughter. Each orphan I took in taught me something different about what it means to be family. The training lasted 2 weeks. Rosa taught from basic literacy techniques to methods of creating healthy emotional bonds with traumatized children. Catarina, who revealed natural teaching talent, assisted in practical demonstrations. The first child to arrive at São Benedito home in Barra Mansa was Miguel, an 8-year-old boy whose parents had died in a cholera epidemic. Thin and frightened, he shrank whenever someone approached. Miguel, Rosa knelt at his height, speaking with the soft voice that calmed any child. "Do you know what this place is?" The boy shook his head negatively. "This is a place where special children like you find a new family. Do you want to see your new room?" During the following 2 weeks, Rosa accompanied Miguel's adaptation and 4 more children who arrived at the home. She observed how Donna Maria applied her teachings, corrected when necessary, and gradually saw the same atmosphere of love and care that characterized the original home being born. "Donna Rosa," said Miguel on the last night before she departed, "are you leaving?" "I am, my dear, but I'll return in a few months to see how you are." "What if I don't like it here?" Rosa hugged him affectionately. "Miguel, you will like it. Donna Maria and the other caregivers will love you as much as I would if you were my son. And if someday you want to visit me at São Benedito plantation, you'll always be welcome." The return to Vassouras was triumphant. The family children ran to embrace Rosa as if she had been absent for months, not just 2 weeks. Francisco received her with a kiss that spoke of longing and pride. "How was it?" he asked while the family gathered for dinner. "Perfect. The home already functions like a true family. Donna Maria has a mother's heart and sufficient discipline to keep everything organized." "And Caterina?" "Caterina was fundamental. She has a natural way with traumatized children. I think she found her true vocation." Caterina blushed with pleasure. "Mama Rosa, can I accompany you to the next installation?" "Of course, speaking of which," Rosa smiled mysteriously. "I received a letter from the Charitable Society. They want us to install homes in Campos and Petropolis too. 4 homes total," Francisco calculated quickly. "That means you'll be traveling a lot in the coming months." "For a good cause," Rosa replied. "And imagine, if each home cares for 15 children, that will be 60 orphans who will have a true family." Jose, who had returned for summer vacation, participated enthusiastically in the conversation. "Mama Rosa, Papa, at Largo de San Francisco, everyone comments on your projects. Professors use São Benedito plantation as an example of efficient social reform." "Social reform?" Francisco repeated. "Jose, we just did what any person of goodwill should do." "Exactly, Papa. But you proved it's possible. You showed that a family can change an entire community, that education and love can break cycles of poverty and abandonment." Rosa observed her oldest son with maternal pride. The orphan boy she had taken in had become a conscious university student, capable of analyzing complex social issues. "Jose, when you graduate, what do you intend to do?" "I want to work with laws that protect children and poor families. I want to use law to multiply what you do here on the plantation." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visit. Dr. Eduardo Ferreira, accompanied by an elegant man Francisco didn't know. "Colonel Francisco, Donna Rosa, I'd like to introduce Dr. Joaquim Nabuco, provincial deputy." Francisco and Rosa exchanged glances, surprised. Dr. Nabuco was known throughout Brazil as an abolitionist and social reformer. "Dr. Nabuco," Francisco stood respectfully. "It's an honor to receive you in our home." "The honor is mine, Colonel. I came specifically to learn about your work. São Benedito plantation is talked about even in the empire's capital." During the visit, Dr. Nabuco observed everything with the attentive eye of a politician and social reformer. He saw freed slaves working side by side with free workers in dignified conditions, children of different origins studying together, poor families strengthening through education and work opportunities. "Impressive," he commented during dinner. "You've created here a society model that all of Brazil should follow." "Dr. Nabuco," Rosa replied modestly, "we just applied Christian teachings of caring for the needy, but you applied them systematically, efficiently, and multiplicably." "That's rare." He leaned forward. "May I ask a personal question?" "Certainly. What motivated you to go beyond caring for your own children? What led you to create this entire social system?" Rosa and Francisco exchanged a look of understanding. "Dr. Nabuco," Francisco replied, "when you truly love, you can't close your eyes to the suffering around you. One happy child reminds us of all the unhappy children. One prosperous family makes us think of all the families struggling to survive. And then you decided to act. We decided to extend our family," Rosa completed, "first to 5 orphans, then to a few more, then to the entire community. True love is like that. It always grows, never diminishes." Dr. Nabuco nodded thoughtfully. "Do you know you're participating in a revolution?" "A revolution?" Rosa repeated, surprised. "The most important revolution of all, the one that changes hearts and minds. You prove that a more just society is possible, one family at a time, one child at a time. That night, after Dr. Nabucco retired, Francisco and Rosa walked through the garden under the full moon's light. "Rosa, do you realize we're at the center of something much bigger than ourselves?" "I realize. And that frightens me a little." "Why?" "Because I feel we have enormous responsibility." "We can't fail, Francisco. Many people are looking at us as an example." Francisco stopped and held her hands. "Rosa, do you remember what you told me when we met, about caring for those 5 children?" "I remember. I said they had no one else, and you cared for them anyway, without thinking about responsibility or example for anyone, just because it was the right thing to do." "That's true." "Then continue doing the right thing, my love. The rest happens naturally." Rosa smiled, feeling the simple but profound wisdom of those words. "You're right. Let's continue caring for one child at a time, loving one family at a time, until the entire world is different." "Until the entire world is one big family," Francisco completed, kissing her tenderly under the stars that shone like blessings over São Benedito plantation. The year 1888 arrived laden with historical changes that would profoundly affect not only São Benedito plantation, but all of Brazil. In May, the Golden Law was signed, officially abolishing slavery, and Francisco faced the challenge of completely reorganizing his property's work structure. Unlike many plantation owners who found themselves in difficulties with the end of slave labor, Francisco was well prepared. For years, he had been gradually implementing a free labor system, offering dignified wages, housing, and education for workers' children. When abolition was declared, the transition was almost imperceptible at São Benedito plantation. "Joaquim," Francisco said to his foreman one June morning, "we need to formalize contracts for all ex-slaves who want to remain here. Most want to stay, Colonel. They know here they're treated with respect." But it was during this period of social transformations that Francisco received news that would deeply shake his family. Dr. Eduardo Ferreira visited the plantation with a grave expression that immediately alerted Rosa. "Dr. Eduardo, did something serious happen?" she asked, serving coffee in the visiting room. "I need to talk with you about Jose." Francisco felt his heart tighten. "What happened to our son?" "He's physically well, but I received a concerning letter from the college. It seems Jose is involved in political activities that could be dangerous." Rosa paled. "What kind of activities?" "Republican movements. Jose is organizing student demonstrations against the empire, publicly defending the republic." The silence that followed was heavy. Imperial Brazil was a constitutional monarchy, but Republican movements were growing in strength, especially after abolition. Being openly involved in anti-monarchist activities could result in imprisonment, expulsion from college, or worse. "Dr. Eduardo," Francisco asked calmly, "what exactly is the risk? If Jose is identified as leader of the Republican student movement, he could be expelled from college. Worse still, he could be arrested for sedition." Rosa brought her hand to her chest, anguished. "Our boy, he was always idealistic, but I never thought—" "Rosa," Francisco gently interrupted, "Jose learned from us that one must fight for what one believes is right. If he believes the Republic will be better for Brazil, but Francisco, he could lose everything, years of study, his future." It was then that Francisco made a decision that surprised even himself. "Dr. Eduardo, I'm going to São Paulo to talk with Jose personally." "Francisco, do you think it's wise? Your position as Colonel of the Empire—" "My position as a father is more important than any political title." The trip to São Paulo was the first time in years that Francisco left the plantation for more than a few days. Rosa was extremely nervous, worried about both her husband's safety and Jose's future. "Mama Rosa," said Caterina, now 17 and one of the main collaborators in family projects, "Papa will manage to resolve Jose's situation." "I hope so, my daughter. But I'm afraid Jose is getting involved in very dangerous things." "Jose is intelligent. He knows what he's doing." "Intelligence doesn't always protect from imprudence, Caterina. Sometimes it's even the opposite." In São Paulo, Francisco found Jose in a modest apartment near the college, shared with other students. The 20-year-old had become an impressive man, tall, strong, with determined gaze and maturity that impressed his father. "Papa!" Jose embraced Francisco with genuine emotion. "What a surprise! What brought you here? You and your participation in activities that could destroy your future." Jose's expression became serious. "Who told you?" "Dr. Eduardo." "Jose, do you have any idea of the risk you're taking?" "I do, Papa. but I also have awareness of the historical moment we're living. Brazil needs to modernize, and that will only happen with the Republic. Francisco sat in the simple chair José offered him, observing the Spartan but clean environment where his son lived. José, explain to me exactly what you're doing. I'm organizing debates about civil rights, public education, child protection policies, things I learned by observing your work on the plantation. And does this include demonstrations against the empire? José hesitated before responding. It includes defense of Republican ideas. I believe Brazil needs a government that truly represents the people, not a hereditary monarchy. Francisco remained silent for long minutes, processing his son's words. Finally, he spoke with a calm but emotion-laden voice. José, do you remember when you came to our house? A 12-year-old orphan boy, frightened and distrustful. I remember everything, Papa. And do you remember what I always taught about fighting for what's right? Always. Then you understand I can't ask you to abandon your convictions, even though this worries me deeply. José was surprised. He expected severe reprimand, not this complex understanding. Are you not angry? I'm proud, Francisco replied, surprising them both. Proud of having raised a son with courage to defend his ideas, worried about your safety, but proud of your character. So, you support me. José, I'm going to tell you something I never told anyone, not even your mother, Rosa. The young man leaned forward, intrigued. When I decided to marry Rosa, I knew I was challenging all the social conventions of the era. I knew I'd be criticized, possibly ostracized by high society, but I also knew it was the right thing to do. And what does that have to do with me? Everything. You're doing the same thing, challenging conventions because you believe in a just cause. The difference is I challenged social prejudices. You're challenging a political system. José was moved by the comparison. Papa, I promise I'll be careful. I won't expose myself unnecessarily to dangers. And I promise that regardless of your political choices, you'll always have family support. We're family before we're monarchists or republicans. The embrace they shared sealed a profound understanding between father and son. Francisco returned to the plantation with certainty that José would make his own choices, but always guided by the values of justice and kindness he had learned at home. How is our son? Rosa asked anxiously as soon as Francisco descended from the cart. He's becoming the man we always dreamed he would be, courageous, idealistic, determined to make a difference in the world. Even with these political risks, Francisco embraced her tenderly. Rosa, do you regret having challenged social conventions to save 5 abandoned children? Never. José is doing the same thing we did, fighting for a more just society. He just chose the political arena. We chose the social arena. What if something happens to him? Then we'll face it together, as we always have, but we can't ask our children to be less courageous than we were. That night, the family gathered in the living room for Rosa to tell the bedtime story, a tradition they maintained since the first children arrived at the plantation. But this time, it was Francisco who spoke. Children, you know José is studying to be a lawyer, but do you know why? To help people who need justice? Ana, now 16, tried. Exactly. José wants to use knowledge to create laws that protect children like you, families like ours, people who need opportunities. Even if it's dangerous? Asked 7-year-old Francisco Jr. Especially if it's dangerous, my son. Life's most important things always require courage. Rosa observed Francisco speaking with the children, admiring how he had transformed his own anxiety into a life lesson for the children. That's how their family worked, facing challenges together, transforming fears into growth, always maintaining unity as the base to overcome any difficulty. And José in São Paulo would continue his fight for a more just society, carrying in his heart the values of a family that had taught him that true love is always worth fighting for, even when that fight requires sacrifices. December 1890. São Benedito plantation awakened on a golden summer morning that promised to be special. Brazil had been a republic for a year. José had graduated in law and returned home, and the family was preparing for the greatest celebration of their lives, Francisco and Rosa's 13th wedding anniversary. But the party would be much more than a matrimonial commemoration. It would be the official inauguration of the São Benedito Institute, the formalization of all the family's social projects into an institution that would endure for generations. Rosa, at 41, radiated a serene beauty that the years had only refined. Her brown hair now showed some silver strands, but her eyes maintained the same kind shine that had won Francisco almost 15 years ago. Francisco, at 52, preserved his erect posture and determined gaze, though the lines around his eyes revealed decades of smiles and paternal concerns. "Mama Rosa," said Maria Joaquina, now a beautiful 15-year-old girl, "are you nervous about today's party?" "A little," Rosa confessed, adjusting the navy blue dress she had made especially for the occasion. "So many important people will visit us." "Oh, Mama," Jose intervened, entering the room wearing his first lawyer's suit. "You've already received deputies, directors of charitable societies, even Dr. Nabucco. What else could make you nervous?" "It's that today is different, Jose. Today we're formalizing everything we built. It's a great responsibility." Francisco appeared in the doorway, elegant in his best suit. "Rosa, do you remember the first time you told me about the 5 children you cared for? How could I forget? I was terrified you would dismiss me. And do you remember what I felt when I saw those children?" Rosa smiled, remembering. "You said you felt pride. I feel the same today. Pride in the extraordinary woman you became, in the family we built, in everything we accomplished together." The party began at noon, with the arrival of the first carriages. Authorities from Vassouras came, representatives of São Paulo's charitable society, directors of the 4 homes that had been created based on the São Benedito model, and dozens of families from the region who had been benefited by the plantation's projects. But the most special guests were the Pereira da Silva family's own children. All 10 children were present. Jose, graduated in law; Catarina, who had become an official teacher; Ana, specialist in embroidery and sewing; Benedito and Pedro, both helping in plantation administration; 15-year-old Isabel, still dreaming of being a doctor; Maria Joaquina, the most talkative and charismatic of all; 9-year-old Hope, a sweet and studious girl; 9-year-old Francisco Jr., already showing interest in business; and 6-year-old Antonia, the family's little princess. Additionally, 23 young people who had passed through the original São Benedito home were present, some adopted by other families, others who had grown to adulthood on the plantation. All considered Francisco and Rosa as true parents. The party's most moving moment was when Dr. Nabucco gave the Institute's official inauguration speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to celebrate much more than a wedding anniversary. We're celebrating living proof that a family can transform an entire society." The crowd applauded, while Francisco and Rosa, hand in hand, heard words they had never imagined hearing about themselves. The São Benedito Institute represents a revolutionary social assistance model. In 13 years, this family educated more than 200 children, provided professional training to hundreds of women, created 4 homes that sheltered more than 60 orphans, and inspired dozens of other similar initiatives throughout the country. Dr. Nabucco paused, looking directly at Rosa. "Dona Rosa Pereira da Silva, you began simply by caring for 5 abandoned children. Today, you're recognized as a pioneer of modern social assistance in Brazil." Rosa blushed deeply, squeezing Francisco's hand. She would never get used to public praise, always preferring silent work to official recognition. "And Colonel Francisco," Dr. Nabucco continued, "demonstrated that it's possible to reconcile economic prosperity with social responsibility. São Benedito Plantation is today one of the most productive in the Paraíba Valley, but also the one offering the best living and working conditions to its employees." After the official speech, it was José's turn to speak as family representative. "My parents," José looked at Francisco and Rosa with visible emotion, "taught me that family isn't defined by blood, but by love. They welcomed me when I was a frightened orphan and gave me not only a home, but also dreams and opportunities." His voice caught slightly. "Today, as a graduated lawyer, I promise to dedicate my career to defending the rights of children and needy families. I want to multiply in laws the love I received in this house." Catarina, as spokeswoman for the daughters, also spoke. "Mama Rosa taught me that teaching is sowing hope. Today I direct a school with 40 students, but my greatest pride is applying the methods I learned, watching her transform fear into confidence, ignorance into knowledge, abandonment into family." When it was Francisco and Rosa's turn to speak, the couple stood hand in hand before more than 100 people who waited in respectful silence. "Friends," Francisco began, his voice firm but emotional, 13 years ago, I made the best choice of my life. I married Rosa, but I discovered that by marrying her, I also married her mission of caring for the needy. It wasn't sacrifice, Rosa added softly. It was privilege. Each child we welcomed taught us something about true love. Each family we helped showed us the strength of hope. Francisco continued. The São Benedito Institute isn't ours. It belongs to all of you who believed in the importance of caring for one another. It belongs to the children who grew up here and will carry these values to their own families. It belongs to this community that proved social change is possible. And mainly, Rosa completed, it belongs to God, who allowed two ordinary people to make some difference in the world. The silence that followed was broken by applause that lasted several minutes. But the most emotional moment was still to come. Miguel, the first boy welcomed at São Benedito home in Barra Mansa, now 12, stood and spoke with a clear voice. Dona Rosa, Señor Francisco, on behalf of all the children you saved, we want to say thank you. Thank you for proving to us that there's always a family waiting for us, even when we think we're alone in the world. When the party ended and the last guests departed, the family gathered on the main house veranda to watch the sunset. 10 children, 3 small granddaughters, daughters of former residents who had married, and 2 hearts that continued beating as one after 13 years of marriage. Francisco, Rosa murmured, leaning against her husband's shoulder, when I found those first 5 children, I never imagined we were planting a tree that would bear fruit for generations. And it will bear much more, Francisco replied. Jose will create laws that will protect thousands of children. Catarina will train hundreds of teachers. Our other children will carry these values wherever they go. The Institute will continue growing. Sometimes I think all this was too beautiful a dream to be true. Francisco kissed the top of his wife's head. Rosa, true love always seems like a dream, but it's the only reality that truly matters. While stars began appearing in December's sky, the family contemplated in silence the landscape of São Benedito plantation, the coffee groves extending across the hills, the school where tomorrow 40 children would learn to read, the home where 15 orphans slept securely knowing themselves loved, and the main house where a family proved that the impossible is just a matter of perspective. Jose, the young lawyer who had once been an abandoned boy, broke the silence. Papa, Mama Rosa, may I ask a question? Always, they responded in unison. Do you regret anything? Challenging society, taking on so many responsibilities? Francisco and Rosa exchanged a look that dispensed with words. 13 years of love, 43 children welcomed, hundreds of lives transformed, a silent revolution that changed an entire region. Jose, Rosa replied with a smile that illuminated the entire veranda. The only thing we would regret would be not having loved enough. And so, on a starry December night in 1890, the Pereira da Silva family contemplated not only what they had built, but mainly what they would still build, because true love once planted grows infinitely, touching lives not yet born and transforming futures yet to come. The story of Francisco and Rosa proved that some people are born to change the world, not through grand gestures or violent revolutions, but through love in action, multiplied kindness, the certainty that each life touched can touch other lives, creating infinite circles of hope. And the most beautiful thing was knowing this story didn't end there. It just completed its first circle, preparing to generate many others for all generations to come.